Hi everybody, welcome to our session. We'll just do quick introductions. My name's Graham Christensen. I'm a senior support engineer with the Level 3 support team based here in Australia. I specialise as a database administrator. I've been supporting the database side of the application for 15 years, starting with Captura in the TowerSoft office in Canberra and moving through the various incarnations of the application and companies that have owned it. With that, I'd like to hand over to Ethan to introduce himself.
Sorry. Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Ethan Wong. I'm based in Melbourne. I'm a Level 3 content management support engineer. And I've been supporting content management for over 15 years, and it's a great opportunity for me to share some troubleshooting tips together with Graham. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah.
Okay, the object of the session. In this session, we'll discuss some tuning tips and tricks with using Content Manager 10 and SQL Server 2019. The intent here is to provide some high-level pointers. There won't be time today to discuss complex customer-specific performance issues you may have come across. For those, we recommend raising a support case for deeper investigation. Please note, with any data changes you do in your production database, make sure a backup is done first. Very important that. Okay, the tips that we're going to include today are SQL tuning, execution plans, and database tuning advisor. Troubleshooting tips, workgroup server logs, etc. Application settings, including Enterprise Studio settings. Schema manager, dealing with duplicate data. Working with database administrators. Content manager specification document and database documentation. An introduction to the STK online help. Just a quick word on workgroup service restarts. And lastly, SQL text versus word indexing and database statistics. Okay, SQL tuning. I'll give a quick demo based on a timeout. So the timeout is the command you set in Enterprise Studio. We'll call it TES for this session. For the SQL generated by the CM search, it will terminate the SQL statement on the database after a set period of time. The Content Manager admins would typically get an email or a call from a user informing them of the timeout. To click the SQL, you'll need to review the workgroup server logs. The execution plan is a graphical display of the SQL statement. The Database Tuning Advisor, commonly known as the DTA, is a tool to help tune the SQL statements. So we'll just jump out of the slideshow for a minute and come into the demo. So up here, typically I've got a chunk out of the workgroup server log that's telling me I've got a timeout issue. So as you can see, it's just it goes through. This is the time the SQL took to run before it was timed out, which will match the time in tiers. It'll give you a bit of detail on who ran it, the server they ran it on, etc. The type of search they were running, and the filters and so forth, and the select statement itself. So just quickly go through the timeout first. The timeout command is set in tiers under the properties of the data sets, under the connection tab. And here's the command timeout. I've set this one rather low just for the sake of the demo. So the default is -1, and if you set it to 0, your SQLs are never going to time out on the database, which is not really a great idea. There's a bit of help, information in the help file about the different settings that you can have. Scroll down here, and it'll just again tell you that the default is -1, which equals 30 seconds. and again 0 means it will not time out. Then just change the settings by typing in whatever you like. I'd be a bit worried if you're running your workgroup servers at 300, because then you've really got a problem, I think, if your performance is that bad. But anyway, we'll carry on. So what I've done here is I've taken the SQL from out of here and just put a bit of format to it. And the first thing I would recommend doing is that you jump back into tiers and you look at doing a schema check, just to make sure that all the database objects are as they should be. There may be an issue with an index or something like that, and the running the schema check may find it and sort and help you diagnose the issue from there. But Ethan will go on about this. We'll talk about the schema check a little bit further down the line. So working with the DBA, the first thing to do, if you can't fix it via the schema check, is just to run this SQL with the actual execution plan ticked. So if I run this query, it will take a wee bit of time, we know, because it's going to time out. So we can see it ticking away down here. And once that comes back, I'll be able to review the execution plan. Okay, it's still taking a bit of time there. Okay. Right, so it took 20 seconds to run. And it only returned 91 rows, which is pretty poor, really. So when I look at the execution plan, this will give me the query itself. And here's the graphical display of what's happening here. So what I can see is that it's actually doing a full scan across the primary key on the table, which is the URIs, then a quick filter and a sort, and then the select itself is coming up. But lo and behold, it's given me a hint here. It's telling me that I'm missing an index, and it says, well, you can go through and create this index, and it'll help this particular SQL with it, and that's quite a high impact as well. So what I can do here is I can just right-click here. I can either save the execution plan and put it in as part of the information if I want to raise a support case. But if you're working with the DBA and you see this, the logic tells you that you're probably better off trying to create this index first and then seeing if it helps before sending it to us. So if I go to missing index details, it'll put that index into a new screen for me, give me a little bit of detail about it, and it'll tell me what database I want to use, and it'll tell me what it's actually doing. But it will give this here, this is where the name should go. So you need to give this a meaningful name. So I know that it's a date range search, so I'll just call this date range. Then I can have a look, and it's on the TS record table, and it's going to use these particular columns to search for and include these ones as well. So if I go and create that, and then I can go back and then run my select statement, it should be a bit quicker. But I just want to show you another way of doing tuning. Sometimes you don't get the luck of this particular saying missing index and what have you coming up. It might not give you anything. So therefore, you're better off using the tuning advisor than that. So if you right click on here, and it says here, analyze query in database engine tuning advisor. So it's a separate tool, but it comes part of the base install of SQL Server. So if I click on that, and now it'll open up the tool, and it'll give me a few options here. I can give it a meaningful name, but at this stage I'm not too worried about that. The database which I want to do the tuning in, and what have you, and it's all connected. So all I need to do is start analysis, and it'll just go through and look at the particular select statement and work out what the best way forward is to tune this particular query. depending on the size of the query too, it might take a little while. But here we are, it's come back, and it's actually, again, it's prompted me that it wants to put an index on the thing and a couple of statistics for that particular index. And again, it's going to give me an improvement of 75%. So I can either save this information and run it again at a later date, or I can go to actions and I can apply the recommendations directly to my database. But again, it's giving this really, really big, long, crazy name. And that's, so you'd probably want to rename it before you actually put it into your database, otherwise it'll look a bit, how's your father? So the idea is that give them a name that's different to our naming convention so that it does particularly stand out if you need to go back and do some work with it. But what we'll do is we'll accept this one here. So we'll create this index here. Shouldn't take too long. Okay, incorrect syntax, yeah. All right, yeah. Okay, it's already there, okay. So now I should see an improvement when I run this particular query. I've still got the actual execution plan to show. So we'll see how quickly this runs. Again, this is a demo. I'd expect to see slightly better, but it's 100% better than what it was. So I'll go to the execution plan again, and you'll notice a subtle change. Now it's hitting the index which we created instead of the primary key index, but it's still doing the same information across here. That's it. So yeah, that's the two tools in a nutshell. It's worth working with your DBAs in the first instance. I'll reiterate this as we go, and see if you can tune the SQL directly from using these two tools. There's other tools on the market which a lot of DBAs like to use, like Toad and SQL Developer for Oracle and so forth. They all have similar tools and will achieve the same results in that. So, okay, we'll jump back into the slide deck. And we'll resume the slideshow. Whoops. And with I'll hand over to Ethan. This is Ethan's going to talk about troubleshooting tips.
Yep. Thanks, Graham. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share some troubleshooting tips under this section. The first tip here is, it's always very helpful if we can have a good understanding over the architecture of Content Manager and what each of the components does, and workflow, like the process workflow for certain tasks or in Content Manager, or data flow as well. So with this, most of the time, we'll be able to quickly identify the function module where the issue may exist in later troubleshooting steps. And then we troubleshoot an issue. Normally we start from the error message. So we should have the right focus on the right focus on the error message, because the error message itself includes a lot of very helpful informations. And the error message can be a pop-up error message in CM client sessions, or it can be an error in an application event log, or in workgroup server, or anywhere we can get information from to triggered by the issue what happened in the CM client session. So with that information, it normally will tell us which application the process or error was reported against and what activities has failed. So it always going to point to specific area, and then from there we will be able to turn loggings on for that specific area in Content Manager to get more information if we want to. And sometimes we may need to run some tools such as Process Monitor or Fiddler, just some third-party tools to help to get more information from outside Content Manager when we need to assist with our troubleshooting. So, oh, sorry. Yep. So this is we can see this is the graphic of a very basic setup of content manager solutions. So we have the content manager client and the workgroup server sitting over the network on each side, and the same client, which can be the CM client, native client, or the Office integration or a SDK program, and which will firstly establish connection to the workgroup server, so it can send the requests and data to the workgroup server through the connection. And the workgroup server, once received the data and request, will be processing the data and the request and pass on the data to the content manager database, the content manager content engine, and content manager document store. So in the case of the user would like to retrieve information, and user will send the request through the connection to the workgroup server, and workgroup server will be getting passing on the request to the backend and getting the data from backend and pass it on back to the client. And the web client works in a similar way. The only difference is there's an additional layer like sitting in between the client and the workgroup server, which is web application, and user from the client end will be accessing the web application in the web browser, and the request will be sent over HTTP or HTTPS request. So with the architecture and the process workflow in mind, we can move on to our next step of troubleshooting. So next step is to determine where the issue occurs. So assume that the user attempts to preview a document in Content Manager and the session hangs there for a long time. And in this situation, we need to look at the error message from the CM client session first and find out what the error is about, and whether it's about which particular process or a function it's going to give information for in the error message, or in the error message, it can state as a workgroup server error, which is an error passed on from the workgroup server, or it can be other components running on the servers. So in that case, we need to have a closer look on the workgroup server to dig for information. If the message includes like a database provider error, or it states like the backend process trying to access some document on the file server and fails in that scenario, we need to look at more from the database service end, or we need to log on to the file system server to look at the system event log and application event log to find out why the document retrieving is failing. And it can be some errors like a timeout error or an RCF error, or it can be pointing to the connection failures. So in that case, normally it's pointing to the network. In the case of there's no error message pops up from user's end, and we can enable logging for the CM client and CM workgroup server for getting more information. So the logs, so Content Manager provides logging for pretty much every single function modules. This includes CM client full client log, where we can turn on different level of logging to capture specific items for activities conducting in Content Manager client. And the workgroup server log for logging keeps the tracing for the activities of Content Manager event processes and workgroup server process. And it doesn't only cover the workgroup server internal activities, but also it captures the records from the client and show how the records are processed on the server. So application crash time is produced when application crash occurs normally. And by analyzing the crash time content, we can find out what triggered the crash or find out what happened before the crash occurred. But with that information, we can investigate further. And there are logins for other function modules like Office integration, render, media server, and idle, web client service API, and so on. So depending on which area we would like to get more information for, we can turn on logging for that specific area. And there are a few tools, third-party tools that I found can be very helpful when troubleshoot Content Manager issues, especially when you need to find out information from outside Content Manager, from system level. So The one always on top is the process monitor. The process monitor can be used when we need to look at activities of application process, and tells us is the content management process having any trouble accessing anything, such as a file, or the file can be locked up by some process, or access to the file is denied, and due to, let's say, local security policies, or even when performance issues encountered and we found in Task Manager that some processes are very busy, consuming, let's say, 100% of CPU all the time, constantly, then Process Monitor can help us to find out what the processes are busy with. And Fiddler is useful when we want to capture the HTTP or HTTPS traffics. So it captures the request and show you all the request information about the request, as well as the response heard from the server. And it's used more for troubleshooting issues encountered in web client or service API. And the resource monitor can be used for monitoring the CPU, RAM usage, and network connection status, so we can quickly find out what process are taking the system resources, while the performance issues observed in Content Manager, and whether or not connection from the process to the workgroup server is behaving normally. And last one is Wireshark. Wireshark is used for tracing the network activities, which is a network traffic, and used more for when we suspect there's a network issue, and we can use that for getting more information. The next topic I would like to discuss about is settings can be used for performance tuning. So we know in Content Manager there's a few settings that we can set up or configure or change to get how Content Manager behaves changed. So the settings include user client option settings, and user search settings, and Enterprise Studio database settings, and the workgroup server settings. So the first one is client user option settings. So the user option settings can affect the startup performance of Content Manager client. So there's a lot of things will happen when users start up the same client, and including getting user authenticated and getting the user security filter built up, as well as it's going to identify the user in CM and fetching the configuration data. Then load the data to client, and the CM client will be trying to initialize the client based on the data. So if there's something wrong with the user configuration data, potentially it can cause the startup session to perform slow. One example, the example here is user find, and it always takes a long time for the Content Manager client to start up, and sometimes it can hang there forever. So in this scenario, while exploring the Content Manager client log, workgroup server log, we can have a look at the user options and have a look at the particular the user's option settings for that particular user, and especially the startup settings. So normally we can do query against the TS XML data table to fetch data configuration data for that particular user. And for the startup setting option, so basically it's a defined list of searches that Content Manager client will run to bring back this result in dedicated search result window for user upon the startup of CM client, and design more for users' convenience, so user don't have to run each of the searches manually every time when starting up CM client session. However, if there are too much data to be loaded, or any of the searches doesn't perform well, it's going to slow down the client startup process. So yeah, after reviewing the startup user options, as soon as we find out which startup item is slowing things down, we can have a look at have a closer look and getting that particular search tuned. The next one is user search settings, which we would use more oftenly. So the Content Manager provides a set of search option settings, which controls how the search behaves. The user can turn on and off the search settings to change the approach taken by CM for searching. It can improve the search performance, and sometimes can even resolve some major searching performance issues. So one example is non-administrator user does a search in CM client and it doesn't perform well. But when you have an administrator user to run the same search and the administrator user doesn't observe the same, but in that case, it's very likely that issue is due to security filtering. So I normally, if I were the user, I normally will go to the search settings page and take the setting of use temp table for security filtering. So as most of the time, user will receive a much better performance afterwards, because with the setting turned on, Content Manager only applies a complicated security filter against a much smaller record table than the entire record table as it does without the setting ticked, and a more complicated search condition applied. And the other one is when the user does title word search and uses multiple keywords, and taking the setting of convert OR operator to union select can get the search performance improved if it doesn't perform well with OR operator. And user can be using the option of using content index for metadata search setting that allows user to search as like a title word search or note word search or any other search that is supported by content index to run against the content index than the database. So using the content index engine for the searches sometimes can result in better performance, especially when the search will involve large number of records in the search result. So Enterprise Studio dataset property setting, that's only one setting I would like to mention here is use filter function for security filtering. This setting is more designed for Oracle database. So with this setting ticked, the non-administrator users who are running searches from CM client will no longer use a security filter that has a long and complicated expression in SQL query. Instead, it's going to be using the optimized security filter function, which normally would lead to a better performance for searching, especially for users who have a very complicated security filter. And there are a couple of SQL parameterization settings available as part of the workgroup service settings, which is also in the CM Enterprise Studio. So the setting can be used for parameterized user query or security filtering. The user can adjust these two settings to get the performance tuned when need to.
Thank you for watching.